environment has changed so much in the last like 150 years or post-industrial revolution, and clearly our genetics and our bodies like haven't as much as the
Right.
environmental change has. And I was just wondering if you think environmental exposures to toxins has had a bigger impact on developing chronic diseases than genetics, or do you think it's an interplay and it's kind of too contextual and that's too much of a generalized statement? Do you think
Yeah,
which
that's a
one do you
great
think?
question. What I say to people is, whether or not we develop any type of illness or condition is really this dance between three things. It's our genetics, it's our lifestyle, and it's our environment and exposures. And the reason I divide them out is because they all have a real play on this in terms of how we live our life and whether we are afflicted with anything. But we have control over all three, and certainly two. We can affect our lifestyle by choices, smoking, alcohol, chemicals. We can, I should say, smoking, alcohol, but also sort of exercise, stress management. That we have the environment, which is more the chemical related, EMF, all those things that we can work on. Even our genetics, which I say you can't change your genes, but you can change and work on your epigenome, which is the proteins that sit on your genes and decide or help to manage whether those genes develop or express disease. And so we have control over those proteins. And I think that has a lot to do with lifestyle and environment. So I'm trying to give people this idea that it's not like, oh, grandma had it or cousin Susie had it, or everyone had autoimmune and everyone had cancer. But guess what? That doesn't mean that's you. And it means that you have every opportunity to try to keep working to reduce those risks that contribute to those diseases, because you can keep genetic risk at bay by what we do and how we live our lives for sure.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting how you mentioned like grandma got it or granddad got it, because like you can be, for example, my granddad, he died of prostate cancer, and that the doctors told my mum that me and my brother are genetically more susceptible of it. But what you're saying is like it doesn't mean we're guaranteed to get it, does it? Like if we
For sure. And I'm not saying I mean, God forbid you do get it, but I'm saying, there are certain diseases that we know very, very classically through research that if your parents have this, then you're going to get it. I mean, there are one-to-one, certain types of colon cancer, certain types of breast cancers. And that's because of the beauty of science that we figured that out, right? We've had genetic testing, we've had really great stuff. But for the vast majority of conditions, there's so much more involved with you know other components. For instance, you said your grandfather, but you also given genes passed down through your mother and your grandmother's side, or I should say your grandmother, and two sides of the family that made up your mom and your dad. And so the idea is that we're sort of like a mutt of genetics, right? We're mixture. We don't know how much one gene that's passed down is predominant over the others, and it's very hard to get that on an individual basis and to scale that across populations. And so again, it goes back to this idea. Yes, you can have family history. I don't even barely ask about it anymore because to me, unless it's one of those one-to-one connections, but we have so much more that we can offer the future generations by what we do now in this generation. And that's also a very important goal because we know that these genes, these chemicals can affect that epigenome. And that's why we want to intervene on those changes as much as we can for not just for us now, but for what we might have in the future in terms of children.
yeah, definitely. And are there any? I've heard that cigarettes, for example, like inhaling cigarettes, often can have a potential genetic kind of effect on your children. Is that the case? Is
Well,
that true?
certainly directly if you're pregnant, that can be their oxygen is contaminated with many of those chemicals. But, cigarettes in and of themselves, again, proprietary blends, you're not going to know what's in them. But what we do know is in them is benzene, formaldehyde, cadmium is very high. I have smokers that I test for cadmium and it's very high when they give up smoking. Their cadmium levels go down. You can also get cadmium from dark chocolate, of course. So kind of remake, is it smoking or is it the dark chocolate, right? So this all goes to being kind of a savvy clinician and asking the right questions, getting a lifestyle history so you don't blame any one thing erroneously. But smoking in and of itself is filled with nicotine and a bunch of chemicals that we know that can be pretty harmful to the human body, certainly at high doses. So we want to be thinking about these exposures in a way that just makes sense. And I would never blame people who smoke. Like I have a really hard time blaming people who are addicted to things because our brains are literally addicted. Some people are addicted to shoe shopping. Used to be addicted to frozen yogurt in college. I mean, it was like insane, right? But I think the way you pull these things away from the brain is slow and deliberate, and have substitutions and peel it away from a brain that's, really adapted to these exposures. I'm not a good cold turkey person. I always think that the brain has to sort of evolve, adapt, and keep moving. But there's so many ways to do these things where you're removing, like diet sodas. I was addicted to Diet Dr. Pepper for, God, 10 years. So we can all do it. It's just a matter of when to get started. When are you ready? Do you have substitutions that will suffice? And is it the right time in your life to get really in control of those things?